Everything set up here. All right, we're good. So we're live. Patrick, Al, let's see, you're muted here. Okay, good. Uh, Glad to have you both back on. You guys have both been on once before. So now we get to kind of all put our heads together and talk about something that's near and dear to two of you, not so much to me. But before we get down the whole carp path, Patrick, do you have any updates on Carp Slam?
Yeah, we're a month out from the tournament. It's a fundraiser tournament here in Denver. All 15 amateur competitors sign up and fundraise to for the betterment of the South Platte River, which runs through this heart of Denver. Their Trout Unlimited is a national organization. I think Denver Trout Unlimited chapter is one of the few, maybe only chapter that has an urban stretch of river that we take care of. It's our 15th year, and all the money goes to making it a better fishing waterway. The last 14 years, we've bought holding water at the reservoir so that on days that the reservoir itself doesn't want to release water, they will release our water to keep flows up, to keep temperatures up, to keep oxygen levels up through the city for the fish. And this year's fundraiser benefits forever access points. I think 10 spots in 10 miles to get elderly and children and people with disabilities down to the water's edge to fish. So it's a great effort or a great cause, and strictly fly fishing tournament. And it pairs 15 amateurs with 15 full-time fishing guides. So teams of two. And I believe, Zach, you're one of the referees this year.
Yeah, nice. Baby.
Right. It's a random draw party the night before. We find out what amateurs are paired with what pros and paired with what controllers. So maybe we'll be on the same team.
Well, wouldn't that be something? So I guess on a personal level, when did they start sending that information out? I know there was kind of like a little pre-party thing on the 14th. You guys got together and did something?
I'm not sure which event. The 14th.
I can't remember. It was something. I got an email for it, I think.
Oh, well, it might have been. We did have a fundraiser at the same place we're doing the pre-draw party. They just had like $1 a beer. Anything sold that day also benefits the tournament. So it was just kind of an open invitation to come in and hang out and have a few drinks. I'm not sure what else would have been emailed about. Sorry, I'm blanking on that.
Well, heck, I'm blanking just as bad. I saw it and I was like, yeah, that's great. I'm gonna be able to make it. Swipe, get out of here. So just real quickly, the tournament set up. You said it's an amateur matched up with a pro. What are the guidelines for winning? Is it most fish, total weight?
Total inches of fish, and you as a controller will be with a team, and the pros and AMs have to catch and net their own fish. Then they'll hand them off to you in a separate trough style net so you can contain the fish a little bit better. And then we measure from nose to tip of the tail. We allow for curvature of the fish. So if you catch a really fat one, you get extra distance. So most total inches of fish caught. So that's a medium. You might, if you catch two really long ones, you might beat 3 shorter fish type of a thing. So
I like it. And are all 15 spots filled this year?
As of right now, all 15 spots are filled, but there's also a minimum requirement of funds. You need to raise funds. So we have 15 people signed up. There's a few spots who haven't raised the minimum of $350 yet. So if you're dead set on competing, if you sign up and fundraise $350 within the next month, you are guaranteed a spot.
Not this guy. Maybe next year. I'll
I was just announcing that to everyone. Carpslam.org.
Carpslam.org. Okay. All right. Enough of that. If you want to talk, if you want to listen to fly fishing and catching carp, me and you and my other co-host Brad, we've already talked about some of the various fly fishing methods. Al, you have been chasing a lot of different species down there in Texas, catfish, and carp is one of them. What made you decide to want to try to catch carp?
So, I mean, I never really gave myself like the title of bass fisherman. It's just what I was just catching, right? So it was never like, to be honest, it was never really a hard pivot for me. It was just more of a, okay, I think it's time to really start targeting other fish. It was more of a challenge for me. So, I've always been open to catching anything else, right? And yeah, so that's kind of like where I went. And then the funny thing about carp, my perception of carp was that they're just weak fish, right? Because, I'm going to get a little bit nerdy. Like, the only time I really have any kind of info on carp was from Pokemon with the, Magikarp and Gyarados. So, Magikarp is pretty much useless up until it evolves. So that's kind of what my perception was like. Okay, so there must be some truth to that. Until people started telling me like, no, they fight pretty hard. I didn't necessarily believe it because I never really snagged one on accident or anything like that. So the catfish thing, that was kind of interesting because I think the third ever fish I ever caught was a albino channel that they stocked at one of the local little nature preserves that they have that's around where I live. And those things I knew from the get-go, they'll fight you, pretty bad, and it's pretty fun. So so I was like, okay. So when I heard about the carp fighting just as hard, if not harder, all right, let's try targeting them. So I started going on YouTube and started looking up at different ways of trying to catch them and everything. And then I just started trying it out. Started looking for places where I've seen people catch carp, and then eventually I finally caught my first one. So yeah.
What method did you settle on as like the one that you thought was going to be the best or the most successful?
So I've talked to a lot of carp fishermen overseas, and they all recommended boilies, right? I personally was not a huge fan. I've only tried like twice. So I basically just settled with a method feeder and, kind of like, yeah, that setup really. Cause, a method feeder, from my understanding, is like a good way to kind of get around like chumming. Like if you can't chum in a certain lake, method feeder kind of, in a lot of places it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
So I just found that to be extra successful, and it was pretty funny because originally I was mostly catching bullheads because they were just going for the fake corn all the time, and it was frustrating seeing just how many bullhead catfish I was catching. That was it was funny and upsetting. And then eventually what I did was and a bunch of turtles, of course, like they love the corn, and I was not happy with it. So but eventually, like I settled on putting a couple kernels on the actual hook, aside from the pack bait that I was making.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of what landed me my first carp. And the first time I ever hooked a carp, that that experience is like no other, because I was had my rod set up, and then I was still bass fishing like on the side, and then I'm walking towards my rod, and then I see it twitching, and I'm like, okay, it's probably just a turtle messing with with the method feeder. Then I see it like kind of like bend forward, kind of like a catfish strike, more or less, where it just kind of bends forward a little bit, but then it goes back. And then the next hit was just the rod bending all the way down. And it's just like, oh my God, I start running towards it. I slipped. I slipped as I got to the thing. And then I'm trying to pull out the rod out of the rod holder, and it just got stuck. So I just pull out the entire rod holder, and I'm trying to set the hook on the fish. And yeah, I ended up losing that one because of the fact that I got it up into the surface and about maybe like 5 feet away from me. And then at that point, I was like, okay, it's time to take off the rod holder, and I lost tension on the hook set. So then it just went away.
No. Patrick, what he just described, the method for catching carp, is that something that's very common overseas? Like Al, you said a lot of things that I don't know anything about. I know nothing about this style of catching carp. So this is an education for me. Is that a European thing?
Yeah, the method feeder is a European style, but it's probably one of the less popular versions of the European stuff, but extremely popular here in the U.S. Actually have one here.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a weighted rib cage looking shape, and the ribbing just allows you to pack in your pack bait, and it holds it, and you can make different recipes out of that, and it just gives it something to hold on to. And it's weighted at the bottom, so once you cast this, basically like a snowball of bait, once you cast it out, it lands on the bottom and the weight is down. And then he mentioned the fake corn on a hair rig. So your hook is below it. And I have fake corn on this. You can have non-floating, you can have floating, or you mentioned a boilie as well, which I do use boilies quite a bit. I was very hesitant. I didn't believe in them in the U.S., but they definitely do work. But corn, a lot of people shit on corn, and it's almost that it's to avoid other species. If you want to target carp, they make the strawberries and the vanillas and the different scents to bring in carp specifically. If you just toss out corn, you might be catching bullhead. You might have bluegills picking off your bait. You might have a drum. Like if you want to only target carp, you dial it in and have it be more specific for them. But corn definitely works. You just might, if you're picky and don't want to catch other species, you might need a more specific recipe.
What's a boilie? Is that the little ball thing that I see on videos?
Yep. So it's boiled so that it's buoyant. It'll float. So I have a little split shot. But yeah, you can boil in. I buy all mine. I've never actually made them myself, but you can the dough and the scents, and you boil them and then you roll them. The manufactured ones are made on a machine that makes like a tube, and then it splits it and rolls them into balls. But the boiling them gives them a little buoyancy, so they get up off the bottom. And so this is a method feeder with the hair rig. The hair rig is just the terminology for what the fish are inhaling or biting is not on the hook. The hook's below what they bite. So they actually hook themselves when they spit it out. So you don't set the hook on them dropping it, because the hook points downward as your boilie or your fake corn floats above the hook.
And you said that was one of the least popular methods. What are the other, like what do most Europeans use?
A really popular one over there is called the chod rig, and it's still a hair rig. The hook being outside of your boilie or your fake corn, but it's on a circle like swivel. And it's loose, and then your weight's at the end. So if you don't know what you're casting into, if there's just muck at the bottom, if there's mud, if there's 3 feet of algae and moss growing up off the bottom, if I cast this thing out packed full of bait and it sits down into 3 feet of moss at the bottom of your lake, even if they can smell it, a carp's not going to go down in there and chew on that and find it. So the chod rig allows your weight to go to the bottom, cut through all the crap at the bottom of the lake, and then your boilie floats and slides up, just right up above the stuff.
That's fascinating. Al down there. What is it, Patrick?
Honestly, there's a lot more rigs too.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
I was overwhelmed with the amount of information I was looking up, and I figured the boilie would be like the easiest one, but then again, I wasn't patient enough with it, so I tried it twice, and then I just kind of went with pack bait instead. My best flavor that I've had luck with has been orange. I've tried strawberry, I've tried cherry. I have some Jolly Rancher gelatin mix that I'm gonna experiment with. It's a green apple flavor, see if they like that. But yeah, like that's kind of like where you could kind of like Patrick said, like hone in on what you're really targeting is by giving it some flavor. And they even make a little flavor sprays for that for like the corn and everything.
I'm surprised you mentioned you were having trouble with turtles too, because usually sweet flavors, they'll leave those alone a little bit more, and that's why they're used to avoid them. Like more meaty blood or fish, fresh cut fish that you target with catfish will also attract turtles, but the sweet stuff usually gets the attention of carp a bit better.
I honestly think it's because in my recipe I put too many breadcrumbs. So it might have been a little bit more bread heavy, maybe. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, because when I started cutting back on that is when I started getting more success with carp.
When I mix up my pack bait, I'll do – a lot of people use panko. It's like breading for fish frying and stuff. I don't know for whatever reason I have a hard time finding it in grocery stores, at least in bigger containers.
Mhm.
So I'll use a lot of just cheap instant oatmeal instead of
Oh.
panko. And I have noticed that when I do find the panko and use it, it floats. It's a lot lighter. So it's got to kind of be a happy medium of oats and bread, and then your flavoring, and then just getting in the right amount of moisture so that if it's too dry, it's not going to pack into a ball. And if it's too wet, it's just soggy and falls off. So you can kind of play around with figuring out the best mixture for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've made the really soggy mixture more than I have the dry, and it's just goes down there like a rock. And then when I'm reeling it in to just basically repack, I have to like shake it violently to get rid of it, and then because it's all just stuck there.
Yeah.
Are the European methods different than, say, like an Asian method for catching carp?
I believe so, just because of the species. The Asian carp is a class of 3 different carp. What is it? Silver grass and big head.
Okay.
A lot more vegetation, eating fish, algae, filter feeders. The European carp is common carp and mere carp, and definitely more omnivores. They'll eat a lot of bugs. They'll eat a lot of crawdads. They'll eat a lot of snails. So I think the fishing styles are pretty different.
That's what kind of threw me a little bit when you were mentioning the sweeter, almost candy-like sprays and flavorings. I always thought of carp as a not so much an omnivore, but more of a carnivore going after crustaceans and aquatic creatures. I didn't know they really dug those sweet flavors.
Well, I doubt. I mean, berries falling in from trees. I mean, they'll definitely know if that's a food source at the time of year. If any kind of thing's falling in, the fish will find it and know it. But I don't know why the sweet stuff attracts them. It's just something different in the water that happens to get their attention. I mean, like he said, his favorite flavor is orange. I doubt there's orange trees down in Florida that are dropping into the water and the carp are going nuts on it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are there orange trees down there in Texas?
I mean, there's some, but not near water. So.
Al, did you take someone with you when you started carp fishing to kind of show them the light?
No, somebody took me actually, because they had a little bit more experience than me carp fishing, so they took me. And like I didn't. The problem was we went twice before I started going by myself because my buddy had to work a lot. So the first 2 times we didn't catch anything. The first time I met him late. So as I was walking towards him, I see that he's holding the carp and he already had caught one, and I didn't see, what the rod bend was like, right? So the first few times even though I didn't have my recipe right, or when I would see the rod tip bend for like any little tiny thing, I'm already, oh my God, there's a fish on. And my buddy's like, no. You trust me. You'll know when the carp hits. Like they hit like a mother effer. Like, you'll know. And I didn't believe it until, my very first time, and I was out on the lake by myself. When I saw the rod, like my rod is a pretty sturdy rod. It's meant for like 25-pound catfish and above. And that thing bent it all the way down. Like it was pretty insane. So I'm now, after catching a few carp, I'm thinking that one that I lost was probably maybe like closer to like 12 pounds maybe, because I remember seeing just a massive like bronze back like just coming out of the water and look kind of fat. And then the other ones that I've been getting are kind of a little bit under the 10-pound mark. And but basically my buddy took me first, and then we haven't really been going a whole lot since. There's the recent time where I went where you saw that reel that I posted on Instagram with the catfish. I mean, with the carp. That was him recording. So, and that's the last time I've tried targeting a carp, and that was like a week ago.
So the tackle recommendations when you're doing something like this, Patrick, when I see all the little Instagram reels and YouTube videos of these guys fishing overseas, they've got these monster, like what I would consider like salt rods. Is that pretty common fare?
It's not needed. I mean, that's what they do. That's what they love to do, and they're going to get tackle specific stuff, but it's not needed. I use my 7.5 foot bass rod quite a bit. It's a medium heavy, and I won't even hesitate to throw on a carp method feeder. It's going to be a little heavier. It's got enough with the medium heavy. It's got enough backbone in it to fight a fish. It also depends on how big a water you're fishing on. If you're like fishing a big lake, maybe you'd want something like as big as some of the Euro style ones are 12 footers, but then they also use like really stiff 9 footers. So it ranges. It's just what you're comfortable with. But as long as you have your drag set correctly, because these fish scream. As long as you have your drag set correctly, you can fight them on a bass rod, no problem. I wouldn't do like a medium bass rod because those are lighter, just so you can throw when you are bass fishing. They're for lighter lures, but something with a little bit of backbone, and you'll definitely be able to handle it. But if you want to get a heavier rod and spend a summer targeting carp, you might as well give it a shot.
That's basically what I'm using. Yeah, like the 7.6 medium heavy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, heck, Patrick, you catch them on your fly rod, so I mean, you're talking a completely different ball game.
It's totally different styles, and I do both. I do a lot of fly fishing for them, but I also only do it when the conditions allow. If it's a nice day, if the river's at a right level, a good level of clarity, a lot of sight fishing. If it's not too windy, if it's even a perfect condition, but the spot I'm at has horribly overhanging trees, I'm not going to mess with getting my fly rod in that stuff. And some people look down on bait fishing, but I'm going to use the technique that at that time that gives me the best shot. So if the fish are deep, I'm not going to fly fish for them. If the water's super muddy, I'm not going to fly fish for them. So, and being able to figure it out and just know the fish. What are they doing when it's muddy? What are they doing when it's high water? So if you know how to bait fish for them and know how to fly fish for them, you're going to just have a better understanding of what they're doing at all times and better chances of catching them.
While fly fishing for them does seem much more challenging, and I might say more rewarding for catching one, you can't overlook the advantages you get from doing this, the bait method. I mean, Al, I'm assuming you haven't been, camoing up and sneaking around banks trying to catch carp. You're just flinging a big ball of bait out there, right?
Pretty much. But I do fly fishing is something that I definitely want to try. I'm thinking probably next year I'm going to start getting into fly fishing just because, again, it's something that I really want to challenge myself doing. I talked to one of my friends that, he does tenkara fishing, and he was telling me like, well, hey, I noticed that you've been catching carp recently, and you do know that they make tenkara rods specifically for carp, and apparently those are a thing as well. I've never tried fishing of that type of method yet, so it's kind of interesting for me to see that, especially after seeing how tough these fish really do fight, because they do fight pretty hard, and they're definitely underrated, I feel like, and especially with like, a lot of the bass fishermen that I've talked to, some of them that have accidentally caught a carp, they'll say like, yeah, they fight hard, but I still prefer catching bass, and I'm kind of more getting to a point where I'm like, I think I like catching carp a lot more now, just because it's fun every single time. Like even if it's like a little like 4 pound carp, it's still a fun fight.
It's totally different, but it's so fun both ways. Like I love when I go to somewhere that's crowded with bass fishermen, and they're like, oh, the koi or the bass or the koi or the carp don't eat anything. I'm like, all right, watch. But it's a totally different fish. Like bass are predators, and you can throw out a popper and make noise and make a disruption on the water, and the bass is going to investigate it or come up and just smash it. And it's the fish going to the lure. If you're fly fishing for them for carp, you have to sneak up on them. You have to put it right in their face without them knowing. They're not going to investigate any. If they hear noise or disruption, they're gone. It's more hunting than fishing. Mm-hmm. And then being able to bait fish. So when you bait fish, it's you bringing the fish to the bait. When you're fly fishing for them, it's you bringing your fly to them. and you kind of get like a balance of I'm not going to bait fish here. I could throw out bait here all day, and there's not going to be any fish. Like, you learn to be like, where would I go if I'm fly fishing? Well, I'm going to go in this section. But if I'm still bait fishing, I'm going to put my bait in the best spot versus just chucking it out where I don't know the depth, I don't know what's out there, and wait for the fish to come to it. So it's just a nice balance.
So when it comes to
agree.
the Platte, would you bait fish and fly fish the Platte? I mean, there are sections where you'll do different methods.
Yeah, just mostly conditions. The Platte River through Denver exists for flood control, the entire city. So if we get a big rain anywhere in the metro area, the river could change 3 feet in a day and drop 3 feet in a day. So if it's low and clear and good conditions, fly fishing it's awesome. It has great accessibility. I've been to other cities to fish for carp, like I've done the Chicago River, and all through the Chicago River downtown, you're almost everywhere. You're 10 to 20 feet above the river on a walkway, and it's just straight down. Like, if you caught a fish, if you caught a carp, you can't drag them up that. So just the Denver, we have the bike path for 9 miles through the area. We can get down to the water pretty much everywhere. So it's great.
What were you going to say, Al, before we cut you off?
I don't remember.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I'm not sure. I don't think I was even going to say anything. I think I was just going to make like a little comment that might not even be relevant anymore. But yeah.
Well, the places you're fishing are different than what we've got up here. So, we were out elk hunting today, and we were driving back, and my neighbor said, "That's probably not really much of a river to you, is it?" And I'm not. No, we were going down the Big Thompson, and it's just this rocky mountain, what I would call a mountain stream, totally void of anything but trout. And you get to the South Platte River, and I've heard so many people talk bad about the South Platte. I don't even know if it's worth my time to go fish other than for carp. But then you go down to Texas where you're at, and I mean, that's bass country. Everybody fishes these big bass lakes, right? Are you fishing the same bodies of water for carp that you are for bass?
It depends. So there's 2 spots where I've been catching them, and both of them are more known for bass and crappie than they are for carp. But it's the weirdest thing, because you like on one of these places you would see a sign that says "Do not eat the common carp," may contain whatever BPA's and all that stuff. And that body of water is not the cleanest, I would say. I think the day after I caught my first carp there was an article published in the local, sites and stuff like that, that apparently they were like digging up like stolen cars out of the lake or something. So I'm just like, okay, yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of carp there, and I know that gar fishermen, they'll go and get a carp there for gar bait. So like for like big alligator gar. But you can find bass there. I mean, I've caught 2 3-pound bass on a tiny little crappie lure, like from there, which is the most strangest thing to me, because I was actually trying to catch a bluegill so I can use them as bait for blue catfish, because that same lake has blue catfish. So, but like there's a lot of little spots like that, little ponds that have carp, and that's what I kind of just see like. In one of the places where I used to bass fish, I remember constantly getting skunked, but every single time I would get skunked, I would see a fish coming out of the water, and I was just like, okay, I know there's fish, and I thought it was a bass at the time, because I mean I was fairly new to fishing. Turns out it's carp, because I know apparently carp, I don't know why they do that, but they just jump out of the water randomly. So now it's like, okay, so now I know where to find them when I see them, and I'll come back the next day with like pack bait or something.
Why do they do that?
I've heard a few things. It's something to do with like their swim bladder, regulating the pressure in it, and I've also heard a theory that they do tend to jump more around spawn time. So I've heard they're like kind of loosening up the eggs. I don't know. I don't know a specific answer for that, but it's not all the time. But yeah, every once in a while they think they're Shamu and just jump out of the water. I was gonna say, for you being in Texas, just everything's bigger in Texas here. Like, it's such an untapped resource. Carp fishing in the States is not that popular at all. It's gotten a lot better over the last 5 years, but the amount of water down that and the lakes and the size of stuff, a lot of bow fishermen, you said gar fishermen, like they overlook carp all the time. So I'm sure there's just monsters down there. And even lakes that are bow fished a lot, that actually it thins it out. So that it allows for the carp that are remaining to get even bigger. They're not competing against a giant population of carp. So that'd be awesome to try some spots down there.
Patrick, if you were heading down to a place like Texas, what's something you would look for in a body of water? Like, obviously you want to look for a lake that has carp in it, but if you stumbled upon something, what would be like a perfect place for you to fish?
I'd look for some, if I had no clue of the body of water and just checking out, I'd look for some sort of, if it's a still lake, maybe there's a creek coming in somewhere, or even just a pipe feeding in that would maybe be bringing in some oxygen or some flow. I'd probably start there. If not, avoid this. It's more about eliminating spots. I'm not going to cast into a ton of moss or a ton of algae. Like, get a clearing where a fish could actually be feeding lower. What else? If I've never been there.
How about like
also move around a bit, experiment. Like, give yourself, I don't know, half an hour. If you don't have anything, maybe try 50 feet down bank. Like, if it's a completely new spot, eliminate the obvious no's and then try a few things here and there.
With carp, do they avoid rocky areas? Like, if I'm a bass fisher and I see a bunch of riprap and rock, like, I'm hitting that for sure. Do you want to avoid that with carp?
They'll cruise it and they'll check for food in it. It's just tougher for you to get. If I'm fly fishing it, I would definitely go to riprap. But it's also then harder to get bait down on the bottom to sit because it might slide down in between the rocks and stuff. But no, it's more that it's a structure. I mean, if you lived underwater and technically a predator can come at you from every possible direction, if you can hold tight to a structure and just eliminate half of, the other direction would be the only way you'd ever be attacked. Like, you're going to hold close to structure and check stuff out the other way.
That makes sense. I always have this preconceived notion of carp as just like this bottom cruiser. Even though that I know more about them now than I did, I still just think of them as this dirt-sucking organism that just hovers around the bottom.
They're just checking stuff out. But I mean, I would, whether it's riprap, if it's rock, or if it's just a normal, gradual slope down into a river or lake, like, I don't usually bomb bait out to the middle. I'm usually always targeting fish around the edges, whether it's, if I'm fly fishing, I'm definitely fishing the edges, but even a big casting rod, I don't go too far out.
Yeah, it's really weird with the carp because sometimes, like, in certain spots, I've seen them like get up to like as close to my feet, and they're just there chilling, like trying to just foraging to see what they can find. And then there's times where like the minute you take a step towards them, they'll just run away. I don't know. They're pretty weird. The good kind of weird, of course.
Something that blew my mind for the Euro style, even though all their rigs and all their baits and everything just is like a untapped resource of like, oh, this is how they do it. Like, unbelievable. I need to learn that. Even once I learned that, I would still fish in front of me. When all the YouTube stuff I watch of the European fishermen, it blows my mind that they'll sit on one bank and they will cast so far and they'll fish. Like I just said, I'll cast close to the bank. They'll cast close to the other bank and just, they'll be 175 yards out of just chucking it to the far other side. And or they'll row it out. They don't even cast it. They'll open up their bail, put their pole in the pole holder, and then they'll row to the other side of the lake and drop it like 10 feet from the bank and then row back. So
is that a little bit of a flex, maybe?
I don't know. I do not take that approach. I would just go to the other side of the lake and fish close in.
Well, I mean, everything's a bit different over there. I mean, it's across the pond. They've grew up with a different culture than we have.
Yeah, and carp's always been huge over there. It's been their
Yeah.
number one sport fish their entire lives. They don't have bass. It's pike and carp get big and they love them over there.
Have either of you eaten a carp?
I want to, but I haven't.
I have not, and for common carp, I probably wouldn't. But what's the invasive one?
The big head.
Big head and silver. Silver is supposedly really good. There's a white meat. The common carp is a red meat, which also shouldn't be looked down upon because tuna is usually like really red. And Meat Eater just came out with a really great episode, 20-minute long. They're like, how can we get Americans to eat carp? And they're like, well, if we get anyone to accept it, it has to be deep fried. So let's figure out the best way. And then they went through like, how do we skin it? How do we fillet it? How do we cut it? One guy filleted it, and there was a lot of Y bones. And then he's like, they ended up with like a tenderloin butterfly cut, and then breaded and fried, and they loved it. It was great. It was a really good episode.
Did you watch that, Al? Because I saw it.
I haven't seen it yet, but one of my buddies told me about that because I've asked this person like, "Hey, do you eat carp?" He goes, "No, the carp is basically a trash fish, but if I do eat it, I would make it into a fish stick." I'm like, okay, so basically like you were saying, like fried. So yeah, which is kind of like, I mean, I don't consider carp trash fish anymore. And again, that was just from what I got like from the grapevine because it's you're like Patrick was saying, it's not the most popular thing to fish for here.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, I need to I did hear about that episode, so I need to go watch it.
Even after they did a great job and helped like shed light on how carp is better than everyone thinks, but it did show that it's still a pain in the butt to clean, and it's super slimy. A lot of tough scales. Like someone would rather have a beer and fillet 50 crappies than dice up a carp and like have to use a Dremel to get through it, But technically speaking, the meat is good.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's just a symptom of some of the places they live. You think of a carp as living in the tepid waters, the still water where there's not a whole lot of oxygen. That's the common conception of them anyway. And like you were saying, Al, that place you fish, it's like, hey, don't eat these things. There's a lot of negative chemicals, and I'm sure the Platte, especially down through the middle of Denver, is probably the same way.
Was that warning for all fish or just carp? Because it's the water, it's not the fish.
That's the weirdest thing. It was just the carp.
That's weird.
Yeah, but there's a different sign that says you can catch blue cat, channel cat, crappie, bluegill, and all that stuff. And there's no warnings on how many you should eat, but the common carp one had like if you're a woman under 50, the children under 50, under I don't know like 18, and all that stuff like don't eat, and if you're a male, just eat it once every month or something like that. But yeah, it was just for the carp for some odd reason.
I bet it's one rogue carp fisherman who put up his own signs to make everyone release his carp for him.
That'd be awesome if it was that. I'm pretty sure. I mean, but it's, I don't know, like that would be pretty awesome.
Maybe you should try that for your bass fishing spots. Don't catch bass out of here; they're really dangerous.
Oh no, that won't work. Like you see so many Instagram posts of people fishing in spots right next to signs that say "Do not fish," and they don't care.
So obviously, your conception of carp has changed quite a bit. Are you going to work on getting other people to fish for carp, Al?
Yep. That's the whole thing about like my Instagram channel. Like it's not really more of a flex, it's more of like a hey, these are the experiences that you get from fishing, right? You already know that I have like my podcast, which is kind of around mental health in the outdoors. So that podcast is an extension of what my Instagram is. So I do want to take people to go carp fishing if they they choose to do so. The problem is like a lot of the bass fishermen there, or I should just say a lot of lure fishermen, it's hard to really get them to sit down and go bait fishing really. So
it's a tough adjustment. I mean, even for me, when I went catfishing on the Ohio River, I was in a boat. It felt really good, but at the same time, you're just hucking a piece of fish out there, you're letting it sit on the bottom, and you're waiting. And that is a tough thing to get used to whenever you're used to sport fishing, like bass and crappie and all that other stuff.
Yeah, and so I've kind of gotten so over the time where I was trying to catch carp, it was like I was finishing up a challenge that I was doing. It was more of a fitness and mental challenge where, one of the requirements was to read 20 pages of a book every day. So to killing two birds with one stone, I would go bait fishing and bring a book and read. I'll read as I'm saying that. Just put a bell on the rod and just go like that. So I've learned to kind of like be. It definitely has helped me like be a little bit more patient and also multitask. So I enjoy it now. Like sometimes like there's days where I just want to bait fish, just sit under a tree and just, especially right now during summer, just sit under a tree and just wait for the carp to bite. And sometimes I just I'll cast the lure out and try to catch some bass.
Do you feel the same way, Patrick? Do you enjoy bait fishing?
Yeah, it just depends again on the situation, but also even every now and then of like if all the conditions are perfect for fly fishing, I'm just gonna sit here and chuck out a bait and just relax. There's a lot of fly fishing is covering ground too. I'm gonna sit here and wait versus walk up a few miles trying to find some feeding fish. So
yeah, I can sympathize with that. I spent 5 or 6 miles up in the mountains today chasing elk. So yeah, I think I would have much rather just sat in one spot and let an elk come to me versus doing all that.
It's great. It's great exercise. I mean, I didn't see fishing, especially like lure fishing, and I would assume like basically what Patrick just said about how much ground you have to cover with fly fishing. It's the same way. I never assumed it'd be exercise, and just like it's definitely changed my perspective on a lot of things, just fishing in general. And then now, right now, specifically carp fishing. Like the other day, I was scrolling through the Reels function of Instagram, and I saw this dude that was like doing the Sparta like lip sync where they're just going oh right, and like for each one it'd be like largemouth, smallmouth, and then like for when it came down to the carp, it was like a little tiny pup like I was like, dude, like you don't realize that carp actually fight way harder than bass, right? Like I don't get why that was a thing, but so yeah.
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned you catfished and then thought they were hard or strong fighters, and then carp, like while catfish pull hard and are strong and like roll and pull, like carp just are missiles. It's unbelievable. I've had a few catfish that just run and I'm like, oh, this is a carp, and then I reel it in. I'm like, holy smokes, that's not how catfish usually fights. But did it blow your mind of how fast and far it took off when you first got one?
Yeah, I mean, just like the rod bend was like just insane. Like just seeing my rod literally bent in half, like that was already like, okay, I've never seen a catfish do this. Like, what the heck? Because when I see the catfish bending the rod, it's usually like a strong pull, then it'll like relax and it'll pull again. So It's not like where like you said, like a carp is basically a little rocket where it just pulls, and and it just keeps pulling. And as I'm I mean, I should probably change the wording of like a rephrase of how I said because like you said, you don't set the hook, you kind of just like give it enough tension to just keep the hook in its mouth. But as I'm holding it like that, like I can feel like the energy transferring all the way down to the rod, all the way to the handle, which is ridiculous. I don't feel that when it comes to catfish. So it's like it's insane just seeing them. And then when they're up by the surface, like you see that whole rocket motion where you just like they might just be chilling like on the hook, and all of a sudden you see them just like dash, like it's insane.
After catching some carp, would you rather catch like a 5-pound largemouth, or would you rather hook into say a 7 or 8 pound carp?
That's not even a fair comparison to the bass. 7 or 8 pound carp is way stronger than a 5-pound bass.
But a 5-pound bass is still sweet too. If I had I'd have to go bigger carp than at 7, 8.
Oh, so like 10, 15 pound carp?
Maybe, yeah. But it's just completely different of I caught actually my buddy when I was in Illinois for the 4th of July. He had a farm pond, and we caught little bass for like 2.5 hours, and then all of a sudden just boom, and I was like, "Get the net! This is a good one." And he had a little spring scale. I don't know how accurate it was, but it said 5 pounds, and it stood out to me. I'm like, "Wow, I haven't caught a 5-pound bass in a long time." So the mark would have to be different. Like even a 20-pound carp. It's just the number. It's nice. 20-pound are pretty rare. 20-pound I catch decently regularly. I think I've weighed a 28-pound carp on a scale, a digital scale, and then I caught one bigger, but my scale was out of battery, so 30 is like elusive to me. But 5-pound bass is still really nice.
Al, what would you do if you had a 30-pound carp?
So somebody told me about a spot next to a marina in Lake Grapevine out here in Dallas Fort Worth. So that's my next spot to try. And they've pointed me to the spot where it's like, oh, dude, I've seen like 30-pound carp. And I mean, when it comes, just because from hearing like people catch their bass, like I've come to realize that you can't really trust when you just say, oh, it's a 30-pound carp, because it might be significantly less. Like I've had people tell me like, oh, there's 10-pound bass or 7-pound bass out of this place, and like realistically, you're gonna catch like a 4-pound bass, or maybe 5, which it's still a good catch, but it's not like a 7-pound bass. But so I really want to check that spot out. One thing I will say, I haven't noticed this from carp because I've only fished them in the summer, but like bass, like a 5-pound bass may not fight the same way. Like that's what I've noticed about largemouth, like especially like if you catch a 5-pound bass in the summer versus like in the fall or spring. In the summer, they tend to be a little bit more lethargic, so they don't fight as hard, at least in my experience. Whereas like in the spring, like they'll fight you for days. And I've even caught recently a 2-pound bass that felt like it was pretty strong. And I don't know if that has to do with just how well they're eating or whatever, but there's definitely differences like that.
Now, even in the wintertime, like I went ice fishing here last year, and while it's a different species of fish, I caught a sucker, right? So to me, they're kind of similar to a carp, gummy lips, feet on the bottom, all that stuff. And I hooked into that, and I thought, oh God, I've got like a 20-inch walleye on here or something. I mean, even ice fishing, it fought like crazy. And I pulled it up, and I was like, a sucker of all the things to catch.
Yeah.
But that lethargic feeling, yeah, I get that. I understand what you're saying.
Like the one of the recent catches before we had before we started the transition in the fall, it was a 4.5-pound bass, and like the bite felt strong, but as I was reeling in, it just didn't do anything. I thought I was dead, honestly, like for a little while. I put it back in the water almost immediately, and it just didn't move for like almost a minute.
Jeez.
Just because it was so hot.
Yeah.
I'll see that difference in carp too, depending on the size of them. Some of the smaller ones are just psychopaths. Like they're screaming around. They won't ever quit. They'll pull drag. They'll empty it out, and then you'll get also a big one where they're super fast, and at least in the Platte, they know to like rub down the edges of the rocks to try and break your line. And I'm like, oh, this is an old fish. It knows to just stay on the edge and beat itself up trying to break the line. Or the next one, if it's a big one, it'll just swim straight and forever. And it'll like just try to empty your reel. And it's just, they act differently and they'll fight differently. And you're just like, what is going on here? But they're all strong.
That has got to be such a good feeling, having your reel just emptied by a fish, just taken off.
Unless they take all of it, then you're sick to your stomach.
I recently had a catfish, and it was my fault because this catfish must have been like 8 or 9 pounds. But so I mean, I can tell the difference between a catfish, like as I'm reeling between a catfish and a carp. Like obviously, like the catfish, you'll see it roll. They'll do the barrel roll, so you'll see the line kind of just shake up and down versus like just a straight pull. But this one time I was fishing for carp actually, and it was, it just so happened that a catfish hit the lure, and all of a sudden, because I didn't put the rod holder in the secure spot, the rod holder kind of like, because the ground was really soft, it like was going diagonal, and all of a sudden I see the rod just fly out of the rod, like the rod holder. So I'm running. That's about as fast as I've ever run before in my life to make sure that my rod doesn't go inside the water. I've managed to catch it. And yeah, that was just insane. Like, and these two fish that's like, I don't know, like I really do enjoy them. And one of the things too that I got into doing recently, I know it's not really so much carp related, is using like really, really light tackle, like an ultralight 6-foot rod to catch like 4 or 5 pound fish. That's been pretty fun as well.
Well, something you've been doing a lot of here recently that I've really been enjoying. It seems like you've been going out of your way to find places that you wouldn't normally fish. So some of the smaller creeks, and to me that's great because you're finding places that everybody overlooks. No one ever thinks to go just to a small little creek and fish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my recent few like for the last 2 weeks. Like I've been posting stuff about creeks just because like I see water and like I see some kind of movement there. So I was like, all right, let's just throw a few lures around and see what happens. And there's one creek in particular where the one where I posted my recent reel. I don't know if it's a drum or if it's a carp, but there's something that stands out that's not a bass or catfish, and it's just huge, like there. So I'm gonna go back there and probably take some pack bait and then also some night crawlers. I've heard of people catching carp with night crawlers. It's the strangest thing. So yeah,
they'll definitely hit a worm. Drum also fight really hard too for being looked down upon. They're strong.
Yeah, screw drum. I don't like them. Yes, they are. They're a great sport fish. They're a lot of fun to catch.
Yeah, I've never caught one before. So I mean, if it is a drum, that'll be a first. And yeah, I mean, it's something that's also like underrated. Like it definitely it deserves its respect. Just it's also is it also a carp? A type of carp?
No,
right?
It's in the perch family, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Oh, is it really?
I think so.
I didn't know that. Are them and redfin? Are they similar?
Yep.
Thought so.
Very similar.
Redfin's one of my bucket fish list. I want to catch one of those things so bad.
I've had a rough year. I've done, I don't know, 3 or 4 guided trips, and all of them have been just the worst weather conditions. I went to Texas, Corpus Christi, Rockport for 4 days to catch redfish on the fly, and it rained 10 inches in 3 days of the 4 days I was there.
Oh, shit.
And then I told you I went to Missouri, Mississippi, and got blanked with a guide there. And then went to Illinois, and it rained for 12 of the 15 days I was there. Like this.
Gee whiz. See, I went back to Ohio, and I had a perfect fishing trip. I only got to fish maybe 2 or 3 times, but the weather was perfect. I got to fish my favorite spots. I caught fish every time. And it made me really miss the fishing there because I have not been very successful here in Colorado so far.
It's a lot different. This summer is kind of odd too. We've had decent rain down here. The mountains are in a huge drought, but we've had decent rain down here. The Platte through the city's been great temperatures and good levels all year.
I think part of it's my fault. I just haven't made the effort to actually get out and fish the way that I wanted to. Some of that's been out of my control, kids, new job, just things didn't line up the way that I wanted it to. But, at the same time, I go fishing and I get blanked 2 or 3 times. I'm like, you know what? I'm good with fishing for a while. I'm going to take a break until ice season rolls around, and I'm going to go catch some trout. Which I can't wait for ice fishing season, by the way. I'm stoked.
I've caught a trout on accident, never caught one on purpose. Not yet, at least.
I've never caught one fly fishing on purpose. That's beyond me. I can't figure that out yet.
Well, and I pissed off a few people with that trout because I mean, it wasn't on purpose. Like I wasn't targeting trout. I was targeting bass out in California, and somehow it hit my lipless like crankbait, which was the strangest thing because I never thought they would go for it. Like I don't know if I hit it in the face with it because it was kind of like side hook, but like part of the hook was still in the corner of its mouth, so it kind of gave me the impression, all right, maybe he went for it. but I was spending a lot of time trying to unhook the little guy. But as I, got him out, he fell, and then he just rolled around the dirt. So now I'm holding in the dirt, and I still took a picture and posted it, and I got, quite a bit of heat.
That is a cardinal sin for trout fishing.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way, and
Well-
so I was like, okay, like, first of all, it wasn't an accident. I'm sorry, and I didn't want it to like fall and roll around. Like, it just fell out of my hand just because it shook, and I was gonna,
That's the big difference. I mean, you were trying. You didn't mean to. It's not like you just caught it and threw him on the ground. And be like, I'll take a picture in a minute. Like, it happened. You tried your best. You know that you want to avoid that stuff, and then people still complain. Send those people the video of them stocking mountain ponds by dropping them out of airplanes, and be like, it's okay. It has some dirt on it.
I've seen a video of a fish cannon where they basically just shoot them into like some lake, just like from a giant tube, and they just shoot out and fall into the water.
Obviously, we don't want to take care of the fish as best you can. There are people who stick their fingers up in their gills or like keep them out of the water way too long. But if you drop it, everybody chill out. We're gonna release it. It's okay. We're not.
That's the beauty of carp fishing. No one gives a shit about what you do with a carp.
Well, I was yelled at so bad once from a European dude because I had my thumb in his mouth.
Oh yeah,
same.
No way, really?
Not even. Definitely, don't vertically hold the carp because they're so heavy. Like, you're holding the fish sideways, and my thumb like went in its mouth in the photo so that it couldn't shake its head, and that guy was mad.
Why?
They treat them it's like the trout here. It's a European, it's carp. They love it. They're like, don't do it that way. And I guess I get it, but
that's bizarre. And you've been the same thing with you, Al?
It's also the U.S. They're shot by bow and arrows, or they're caught and thrown on the bank. Like, it's okay. I'll take it into consideration. Tell me that. Don't scream at me first.
Yeah, I got this similar situation with, again, European carp fishermen, not so much anybody in the U.S. Because basically, so what I was trying to do to get the picture, I held the carp, and then all of a sudden it fell because it shook, so it fell, rolled around, and there was a lot of like dry grass, so it got a bunch of dry grass on it. So then I still ended up taking the picture. And again, this is my first carp ever, so I didn't know like how delicate their slime coating is. At least that's what they were telling me, is like the slime coating is pretty delicate, which is weird because I released them back out, and I saw like all the grass just fall off of it like as it hit the water. So, but yeah, I got some heat from just doing that. Like, oh, you gotta be better as a sports fisherman and this and that. I was just like, ooh, okay.
But that's also good to know. Like, it's the next time if you are carp fishing and you see someone laying them in the dirt, send that knowledge along. Don't present it the same way it was presented to you, but it's a good thing to share, because you do see, especially in the U.S., you see people stick their fingers up a carp's gill and just hold them vertically, and they're so happy about the fish they just caught. And I hope they love carp fishing, but don't do that, So
yeah, no, and I did have one guy comment saying like, hey, I'm glad that you caught your first carp, but we just still keep letting you know even though they're really strong fighters, blah, 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 and all that stuff, they're really delicate as well. So make sure you do a little bit better to like not let it fall on the grass. So I was like, that one I took, and now I have my own little mat for unhooking the carp. Like, I don't just do it from the net. So I took that to heart, because it was presented in a way that's like, okay, this is constructive, and I'm always willing to learn. So, but then there's some people that were just like pretty douchey about it.
They landing mats, landing like troughs, and floating containers and everything. Like, I don't have very much luck carp fishing at night over here, but carp feed all night, and in Europe they'll catch them and they'll put them in a floating net just for photography purposes. They'll take photos of them in the morning before they release them, and that thing floats in the water all night. It's not a stringer. It's not through their gill. It's not like they're just encapsulated and floating in their in the water. And even when they're then taking photos, it's a little trough that they're pouring water on them, and it's safe. The surface is safe for their slime coat and everything, and they got everything figured out. It's a huge market. BigCarpTackle.com is probably the biggest thing vendor here in the U.S. It's overwhelming, but they have what you need. And
If a lot of stuff.
If you're just getting into carp fishing too, I would highly recommend Carl and Alex YouTube channel. They have their videos and their movies, but then they also have a tutorial channel that explains every rig, how to look for fish, what to look for, and baits and everything. So
awesome. Gentlemen, I need to wrap it up and get ready to go sleepy times because I'm super tired. Do either of you have anything you want to add before we finish up about carp fishing? Patrick, you want to plug Carp Slam again or anything?
Sure. We got.
Oh, is that a spam can?
It's the slam can. Not the slam.
I like that.
Yeah, Carp Slam is in a month. If you're listening and enjoy carp fishing, all of the amateurs do fundraise. If you go to carpslam.org, if you want to throw a few dollars at the fundraiser, you could just pick an amateur competitor, and it'll go 100% to urban river restoration.
You also have your own store. You sell the racket nets, T-shirts.
I also run urbananglerusa.com. It's a blog for urban fishing, and I repurpose recycled tennis rackets into tennis racket nets. It's a lot of R's in that sentence. Recycled racket nets.
And they are super slick. Do you have one? Yeah, look at there. That's a tennis racket, my man.
Is that for trout basically, right? Because that's going to fit a carp.
They're fantastic trout and bass nets. And just because I carp fish so much, I do carp fish with them, but a big fish has to go in head first. But they work. They're great for covering ground. That's the biggest thing is I have bigger nets, and I have ones that a big carp will go way down in, but I don't want to be crouching underneath trees or even walking a mile with it on my backpack. So this one, they're small, and if you do get into a big fish, just put them in head first, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and then Al, you've got your podcast if you want to plug it real quick.
Yeah. So you can find me on New Age Alchemist, all one word, on Instagram and YouTube. YouTube is where I post my episodes for my podcast, which is called Mindful Endeavors, and that's specifically more for mental health in the outdoors. Sometimes those two topics are tied together, so we have discussions around that, and we do include other things, maybe like some financial stuff and some cooking stuff as another way of kind of mentally decompression. To mentally decompress. So that's the thing that I kind of do the most, and then also I'm going to be doing some more vlogs pretty soon, especially around the creek fishing stuff, because like you said, it's something that's not really explored a whole lot. And really, my whole thing with Instagram, even the podcast, is basically try different things, challenge yourself. It's one of the reasons why I'm ended up in a carp fishing world now, because then I kind of ended up loving it. So, but yeah, check my podcast out. Mindful Endeavors it's on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. So yeah.
Gentlemen, it's been a treat, and hopefully I'll be heading down to the South Platte here soon and watching some people catch some big carp.
Hopefully we can actually fish sometime soon, but if not, you're coming down here for the carp slam.
Got it, man. You got me.
Dude,
Gentlemen,
I'm down to go carp fishing over there. Let me know one of these days.
Hey, you need to come up sometime, man. I'll show you around.
Dude, I will hold you. I will definitely take you up on that.
Gentlemen, have a good evening.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Later.